What is up? Welcome back, everyone, to Making the Grade, where we're going to look at the PFF grades from the Arizona Cardinals' most recent game, the loss against the Houston Texans. It was disappointing as a follow-up to the game where they won with Kyler coming back against the Atlanta Falcons. But there's still some nice things we saw here. There's some things to look at. So we're going to get into the grades as we always do. Let me say hey to some of the folks that are already here. We've got Thunder asking, so Paris is the lowest graded of the top tackles taken in 2023. Is that a couple bad games bringing his average down, or is every week bad pick, coaching, or does he need time to develop? That's a really good question. I think in terms of his grades, and we'll look at them. He's had a couple bad weeks, couple decent weeks, but he's pretty consistently been in the 50 to 60 range. So he's actually been fairly consistently kind of, at least his grades have been consistently kind of average. Not really average, maybe mediocre. I think it's part development. He's a rookie, but we have to remember Paris Johnson in college played primary left tackle the most recent year. And then the year before that, he played right guard, and he's playing right tackle right now. And this is one of the things we've talked about with tackles, switching sides, it can be tough. Yes, he's played on the right side at guard, but guard is also different than tackle. So I think we've seen enough good things out of him. In some metrics, like, win rates and things like this, he's fared better. Starting every game as a rookie is in itself, pretty good start. I want to see what he looks like when they move him over to left tackle at some point. My suspicion is he's going to be the starting left tackle next year. We'll see. But, so it's a good question. I'm not worried about him at this point. Again, he's a rookie. He's playing well enough to start. No one on the offensive line is really killing it this year. So, we'll see what happens with that, right? Now Austin saying Andrew Thomas took a year to become elite. So we'll see what happens. He's getting valuable reps. Offensive line is also sort of a team unit. Sometimes, if the whole group isn't playing well, sometimes it impacts that. So again, I want to see what it looks like at left tackle, seems to be his more natural position. But I'm not worried about it. But yeah, it has been a little rough. Keith Davis, thanks for being here. Let's go, Joe. Appreciate you. Chris Young, it's that time again. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all. So let's get into it. Let's get into looking at the grades. We'll start with the offensive side, which is generally where we like to start. I think that's just a little bit bigger. Let's see, right there. Okay, so let's start by sorting it. I like to sort it by pass blocking snaps, just to kind of get the offensive line up to the top. So starting up with the offensive line, we've got Paris Johnson Jr. here. We mentioned him, graded at 51.9. Was a little better in pass blocking than run blocking. So it wasn't great. It was kind of a little below average. Carter O'Donnell, didn't grade particularly well, 49, but sadly that's an improvement over what we were getting out of Elijah Wilkinson. So this is the guy they picked up off the waiver wire. So he's been better than what we had there. It's not ideal, but it's better than what we were getting. Will Hernandez, this seems to be the story most weeks. He's one of the better graded offensive linemen. 62.7 isn't great. He was better in pass blocking than he was in run blocking, but it's average-ish. So it wasn't horrible. Froholt had a decent but not great game. 57.8, average-ish. Maybe it's slightly below average. A little better in pass blocking. Humphreys had not a great game. He was the highest graded offensive lineman. He's had a tough season. We've talked about this. You look at it. He's had a couple okay games. He hasn't had a horrible game, in the 30s, hasn't had a great game. He's been really kind of mediocre. It is easily the worst season of his career grade wise. When the Cardinals drafted Paris Johnson Jr., I did a video about that pick, a reaction video, and sort of kind of the premise of that was that I think that he was going to be replacing DJ Humphries after this season, that I think this is going to be Humphreys' last season with the Cardinals, and we'll see if that happens. But I have a feeling that it will be. We'll see though. Couple comments we'll get at here. Keith, can we trade Marcos Wilson for half a bag of Fritos? Man, I don't know. I mean, are they chili cheese Fritos or regular ones? I don't know. Wilson, we'll talk about him. It has been rough. Chris Young, I would really like to see a game where Garrett and Marco trade places. I want to see what Garrett can do as the number one guy, and I want to see if Marco perform better, not be number one guy. I completely agree. I want to see Garrett Williams taking snaps as the number one quarterback. And we'll look at his grades. He's played really well, especially considering he's a rookie. And, sometimes when you get a guy like Marco, he's struggling so much as the number one, covering number ones. If you move him down the pecking order a little bit, right, to where he's the number 2 or 3 cornerback, sometimes that fixes things up a little bit. So we'll see. I hope. Well, I hope we will see Garrett Williams getting those snaps. We'll say that. Aaron, Salty. Wait, let me say hey to you, Salty. Thanks for being here. Was it a mistake to draft Paris Johnson over Anderson? I mean, you got to remember the trade back, right? If we're taking Anderson, we're not getting that first round pick next year and everything else that came with it. I don't think it was a mistake. I think Paris Johnson will be okay, and I think what we're going to get with the combination of picks, but we'll see, right? We'll see. We'll know in a couple of years, right? But Aaron, thank you for the super chat. My good friend Aaron Van Buren. Can PFF start grading coaches? I have to see what grades on skipping field goals multiple times and then losing by 5. Hope you're well, Joe. Thank you. I am doing great, Aaron. Yeah. That'd be interesting. They do have certain advanced metrics that look at coaching kind of things in terms of tendencies and such. Those metrics aren't available as far as I know to general subscription, like the premium subscription that I have doesn't include that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they have. I don't know if it's that they grade the coaching quality. They certainly grade tendencies, but I have seen, like, if you read some of their articles and such, I've seen PFF do articles where they've talked about in the past how well coaching affects or makes an impact. So they've got to have something in there. I just don't think it's something you or I really have access to, but thank you for the super chat, Aaron. I appreciate you. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're getting some good running in. Aaron has a channel where he does marathon or running things into running content. He does marathons and such. So indeed, appreciate you. Chris saying, I don't think so. In my opinion, protecting Kyler is top priority in terms of the question about the offensive line or Paris Johnson Jr. versus taking Will Anderson. Let's see. For chat, thanks for being here. Kyler looked like he was with Cliff again. Shotgun plays and vertical. I'll tell you what. I watched the game. The first full broadcasts of it, and then before going live, I just watched the condensed, like the version on NFL Plus where they cut out all the commercials and the filler, and you get the whole game like 40 minutes. So I rewatched the game today, and I kind of kept tallies. I'm sure there's some place you can find this information, but just for my own, I kept tallies on shotgun. Can you see that? You probably can't read it. Oh, wait. Shotgun versus under center. It was 55-5. I counted 55 snaps in shotgun, 5 under center. The snaps under center were mostly runs or play action. So, this is the question I ask, is it because what they want to is this Drew Petzing saying this is what Kyler's good at? We've decided we want to build an offense around him, so we're going to do this, or is it, hey, we want to ease him back in? He's playing for the first time in a year. Let's do more of these, and we're going to work in the under center stuff. Salty saying, what's up with Kyler refusing to take snaps? Well, under center. Well, okay. I mean, do we know he's refusing? That's the question, right? I think that's a fair question. Do we know he's refusing, or is it that the coaches are making that decision? I doubt that it's a matter of him refusing, right? It doesn't seem like this coaching staff is going to respond to refusing to do that. I think it's more a coaching decision. Now we can ask why, right? Why is the coaching decision make that? Is that what they want to do or not? You think Kyler's incapable of taking steps instead because he's short? I don't know. He's not incapable. He took 5 of them, but the question is he less effective in that? I don't know. Maybe he is. That's what people say, right? That the ability to kind of read the field and such, but I'd be really curious what the coaching staff's take on this, and hearing what they have to say on it, because how much of this is them just deciding this is what he does best and they want to play to that strength. How much of it is them trying to ease him into that? I don't know. Right. Salty saying it's not refusing, but the coaches want to play to strength and he lacks the ability to severely handicap your offense. I mean, yeah, I'll be curious to see what they're doing 4 or 5 weeks from now with the snaps. I'd be curious to hear their thought process. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Aaron saying, but there was a play action under center, which was taboo in Kingsbury. Yeah. So there's some under center plays, just not as much as people were hoping for. So I am legitimately curious again, if this is them easing him back in or if this is the offense they're going to build. So we'll see what it looks like. Right now, I know it's been a little bit kind of tough getting off the ground a little bit. Last week was better than this week. But yeah, we'll see. So the offensive line, the performance was so, right? It was, right? Not great. We've seen worse. We've seen better, right? There was a little bit of pressure, right? And, listen, D'Amico Ryan's a good defensive coach, right? And they've got Will Anderson we talked about. So, they're going to get some pressure, but we've seen worse and we've seen better performance from this offensive line. So getting to the positions. Tight end, Trey McBride had a good game in terms of passing, and run blocking was okay. Pass blocking on, just one snap. So he was bad on one snap, but that's only one snap. Overall, he had a solid game. The receptions didn't have as many as he had, last week, but still he's looked solid. It's tight end number one. Elijah Higgins, and had that one play that looked like it was a great catch, but then there's the replay and it did hit the ground and bounce just a little bit. So, he didn't grade particularly well. Jeff Swain, had a little bit of a down game. But Trey McBride, man, continues to be solid. This was not as good of a game as last week, but last week he was the highest graded player in football. We've got, overall, you look at what he's done this year, it's been solid, couple lower graded games, but overall, he's grading 78.3. Trey McBride is just really establishing himself as the guy, as a tight end, and as one of the main receiving threats. Then we have Rondale. Let's see, getting to the receivers. Rondale Moore, probably one of his better grading games, sadly, because he's had a little bit of a rough year in terms of grades. He's been in this 50s, sometimes 60s range most of the season, graded at 54.6 overall. Had a 64.4 this game. Rondale Moore, I wonder how much of it is what they're doing with him. It doesn't seem they're using him a lot down the field, though he had the one touchdown, which was nice, no doubt. Greg Dortch, man. Greg Dortch, every time he plays, he just looks good. And, I know fans are consistently asking, why are they playing Rondale Moore over Greg Dortch? Greg Dortch outproduces him. Rondale Moore does have speed that Dortch doesn't. He does. They can do some things with him gadget-wise that they can't with Dortch. But, man, Dortch, every time he plays, is so good. It's just hard to justify keeping him off the field, right? Austin KK, thanks for being here, saying Dortch needs to play more. And I agree. I want to see more of him. He's just consistently making plays. His grades have been great this year, but most of those are weeks where he gets one snap that, other than special teams. He had a couple with more snaps, but man, great week this week. And in his career, he's been solid, grading in the 60s start his career. He makes stuff happen. I would really like to see more with him. Hollywood Brown had a rough game, but some of this, and Forchub asking a really good question. Why do you think he's underthrowing? Kyler's underthrowing a lot, and Kyler underthrew Hollywood Brown 2 or 3 times. One of them led to an interception, right? And a couple others that were not intercepted but could have been. Hollywood Brown had a little bit of a rough week, but yeah, Kyler. Listen, I love Kyler. I am still completely on board with building around Kyler. I am of the mind that you need to give him some time. He's, his first 2 games back in a new offense with a new coaching staff after having been out for nearly a year, recovering from an injury. I'm, it's going to be a little rusty, but the running has been fine, right? The running has been better than I thought it would be, and many people thought it would be at this point. When you talk about ACL injuries and recoveries, they always, say, the first year back, the running is like 80 or 90%. Like you're just not quite there running 100% until the following season. And Kyler has looked really as good as ever running the ball. So it's kind of surprising to me that the running has been right there and good, and that it's the passing where he's struggling. But I think he's probably a little rusty. Some of his throws were a little wobbly. I wonder if there's something, just going on with just really not being, maybe, I don't know. I mean, he's been throwing throughout his rehab, so you think that's there, but part of the throwing motion is, throwing involves full body mechanics. So I wonder if that is part of, the recovery, just the legs and such. I don't know. I don't know if he's just rusty. I don't know if it's a playbook, or I don't know if he's just having a couple rough weeks. It still looks better than, what we've seen from some other quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, he's underthrowing, and some of the throws are off in other ways. So I'm going to give him time. We need to see that. We need to give him some time. It's, again, he hasn't played in a couple years. This is like his equivalent of the preseason in a sense. So, but yeah, that is something I've noticed as well. Voight Royal, thanks for being here. What's up, Joe? Appreciate you hanging out with us. Saltiest McBride is definitely a core piece of the future. 100% agree. Real excited from what we've seen from him. Keith Davis saying, interested in your comparison of Cards and Texas, both thought to be rebuilding and both predicting to have bad seasons, but Texans seem to be doing a bit better than us. Yeah. I think the Texans have better personnel to start with right now. Certainly they've got some players this is a team that's kind of been building for a couple years. There's a new head coach, right? And they're kind of starting with this fresh rebuild, but they've kind of been in rebuild mode for a couple years under previous coaching staffs. So they've got some young players that they've drafted over the last couple years, plus what they added this year. And DeMeco Ryans seems like a really good coach, and they've seemed to have struck lightning in a bottle, caught lightning in a bottle with CJ Stroud, who looks like just he's going to be a legit franchise quarterback, MVP candidate as a rookie. And they've had him all year, right? We're just now getting back, Kyler, and kind of getting off the ground now. But yeah, I think they've got the Cardinals just this last offseason were in that stage where they're clearing, the roster of aging veterans and big contracts, and then, guys like DeAndre Hopkins and letting other guys walk like Byron Murphy Jr. And, this is like ground zero for every part of the roster, really, except for quarterback, right? Just revamping the offensive line, revamping defense, revamping receiving core. So I think the Cardinals are really starting from, the ground level. And I think the Texans, it's a new coaching staff, but that rebuild's been going on. They have some other young players they've been working with, Damian Pierce, guys like that. And again, they've got their quarterback from the beginning of the season. So I think they're doing a great job there for sure. Let's see. Keith saying, is Hollywood due for a new contract? I don't see him deserving wide receiver number one, money, speed, but not a number one. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to have to pay him. I think they're going to keep him around. I think he plays an important role in this offense, and it's tough. I know the production has been off the last couple of weeks. He's had some good games, but his speed is hard to beat. I mean, there are not many receivers as fast as he is. And when you look at what an offense, can look like, if you've got McBride doing the things he does in the middle of the field and intermediate, and doing all those tight end things. And then you have Michael Wilson being that big receiver who can out move the chains on third down and be a red zone target. What Hollywood Brown gives them is that guy with elite speed who can take the top off the defense. And I know people have talked about his issues in terms of catching the ball drops. I think that's somewhat overstated, but he has had some, no one's going to mistake his hands for Larry Fitzgerald or DeAndre Hopkins. But the thing is, for a receiver with his speed, that almost doesn't matter in terms of your ability to impact the game, because if you can take the top off that defense, like he's capable of, once they get things rolling, the safeties and the defense backs have to kind of honor that, and that opens things up underneath for guys like McBride. So I guess what I'm saying is, when I see this offense, in my mind, when I see what this offense looks like fully functioning with a healthy Michael Wilson, with Kyler Murray up to speed, with Trey McBride doing what he does, Hollywood Brown plays an important role as that deep threat. So will they pay? I think they're going to pay him. I don't know if he'll get, I don't think he'll get top of the market money, but he'll get probably more than a lot of people are comfortable with. And they can kind of do that in part because Michael Wilson's on a rookie deal. If they draft another wide receiver, that you've got some room to work with on that. They're going to have a lot of rookies because, they've got the guys they draft this year. They're going to be drafting a lot of guys next year. They're in that stage where they're getting a lot of those young players in there on rookie deals, and you can afford to pay a bit for a guy like Hollywood Brown if you want to. So I think it's going to happen, and I think he has a role to play, right? Salty is saying Moore can go like most other players. They need bigger, taller receivers. Yeah. The tough part with Rondale Moore is he if you want a gadget player, he's about the perfect skill set for that. His elusiveness and his speed. He can be so good in that. But there's, for a guy like Dortch, is doing more things when he's getting the ball. So, yeah. Chris Young saying, I think Dortch's X factor is how much heart he plays with. Yeah, no doubt. Keith saying Stroud was impressive. So yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of moving pieces moving forward with that. And Rondale Moore, I don't think, unless he's going to sign for not a lot, I don't know if he'll be back for a second contract here. We'll see. Would love to see Dortch with an expanded role. I think Hollywood Brown will stick around as that deep threat, and he can be effective. And when they get things rolling, they've got the offense the way they want. He could be a really impressive part of that. So we look into the receivers though. Greg Dortch had a really nice game, looked really good to the eye test, and the grades reflected that. Rondale Moore had the one deep touchdown. Other than that, was kind of not super impactful. Hollywood Brown really didn't do much. Was underthrown a few times. Kyler Murray, we'll look at his grade, 63.5 for his passing grade, his running grade 66.2. That checks out to me. Like his passes, he had a couple rough throws, but a couple nice throws. Certainly the deep, touchdown to Rondale Moore. Ran fairly effectively. Want to see him continue to get better, but I'm going to give him some room in terms of getting up to speed. Bachelia had 5 snaps, was kind of, not really a factor there. And then running backs, Tony Jones Jr., he graded reasonably well on 16 snaps. And James Conner, he was tough, graded poorly in pass blocking. That's on 1 snap. So, we're not going to think too much about that. He ran his running grade 68.4. So, he had some really nice runs, a couple where he got bottled up, but I thought he looked good. We know he's been good all year though. Love James Conner, what he does for this team. Okay. So that's what we're looking at on the offensive side of the ball. Not a lot of very good grades, but they put up 16 points. So that's kind of what you would expect. So it wasn't great, right? Brian Perkins, thanks for being here, hanging out with us. Joe, thanks for all the hard work. Thank you. I appreciate you, Brian. It took Burrow 4 games or so to get the rust knocked off. Kyler will get better. You're the man. I thank you, Brian. I appreciate you. That's a good point. When he came back, he certainly took some time. Burrow did. So Joe Burrow. So I think it's just a matter of giving him some time. We've seen what he can do in the past. I think this offense is going to work well for him once it gets going. Then going over to the defensive side, the defensive grades were overall, there were more good grades. There were also more really bad grades. We'll get to that. So you see, Chris Barnes, 22 snaps graded really well. And We're going to be seeing a lot more Chris Barnes probably because, as you've probably heard, Kaiser White's going on the injured reserve with, I believe, it's a torn bicep, so he's going to be out. So let's go by position here, though. Starting with the safeties, so now starting Thomas, he's primarily a cornerback, but he must have played a lot of snaps at safety. Let's bring him up because they got him listed there. Let's look at his snaps. Alignment snaps. Now that's interesting. They got him. I wonder if that's just a mistake there. Looking at this game. Look, mostly corner. Oh, wait. Well, let's see. Box safety there. Or that's linebacker or safety. Yeah, that's kind of confusing why they would list him as a safety there, because he really was primarily snaps as cornerback. So that's probably a little bit of an error there. But Jalen Thompson, solid game, 72.1, had the interception. Budda Baker didn't have the greatest game in terms of grade, 57.7, but we know who Budda Baker is. Let's see. And then we get into the cornerbacks. We're going to look at Thomas really as a cornerback on 33 snaps, 68.6. Now, starting Thomas is, I believe it's undrafted free agent. Undrafted free agent. The Lions had originally signed him, and then the Cardinals got him. And he's had some good games and bad games, but for an undrafted rookie free agent, graded 59.0 overall. Certainly this was a nice game for him on 33 snaps. So, he's grading better than another cornerback we're about to talk about in a minute. But Garrett Williams continues to impress, right? 67.5. We look at what he's done throughout, since coming back from that injury. First game back was a little bit low, and the Cleveland game was, a little low, but even that's like better than what we're seeing out of Marco Wilson, right? But he's graded really well. He's graded 69.4 right now. I want to see him as the number one cornerback. They're still playing him primarily as slot cornerback, you see here, right? 45 snaps at slot cornerback. We do see his snaps up to 52 though last 2 weeks, so they're playing him a lot more. So definitely want to see him get some more. I want to see what he can do as quarterback one here. Going all the way down here though to Marco Wilson, 31.9 with a 31.8 coverage grade, right? That is rough, right? And we look at Marco Wilson, 4th round pick a couple years back. This is his 3rd season. He's grading worse than he did as a rookie. It's been up and down, but more down than up, right? He's had a few decent games. He is playing as cornerback one, which he's drawing tougher assignments, right? So you have to take that into account. But man, it's just not been good overall. And the eye test and the grades both reflect that. He's getting beat a lot. And I know he's adjusting to a new defensive system. He's not the answer at cornerback one. End of last season, it seemed like he turned the corner a bit, but man, he regressed this year. And then, not good for Marco Wilson. I think they just want to see if he can figure it out or something in their system. I mean, they keep running him out there, but I tell you, I want to see Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams outsnapped him 52-50. So I don't know what that says, right? Blue Fire 41. I think Marco had a nearly perfect pass rating when targeted yesterday. Oof. Yeah, the quarterbacks had nearly a perfect pass rating when targeting. So that's rough. So yeah, not good. Coming back to the Kyler conversation, August KK saying, think it might be mechanical for Kyler. He generally keeps great mechanics, but there might be some tweaks from Petzing to intro. That's a good point, right? And Chris saying, it's a good point. The value of reps in practice can't be overstated. So again, I'm not worried about Kyler, giving him that time, right? But I am worried about Marco Wilson. Not been good. Right. So then we look at the safeties. Then we've got free safety. Sasheri, I always mispronounce his name. He seemed to get 2 snaps every week, right? He's in there for just a couple snaps. I mean, at least lately, right? Three or two, right? He's really, I think, since Buddha's been back, right? So yeah, so not really enough snaps to really warrant discussing that in any greater depth. But let's look at. See, I'm gonna bring up the pass rush snaps, sort of by pass rush snaps, so we can get the defensive front players up here first. All right, so looking at the defensive line, right? Edge rushers and interior defensive linemen. Dante Stills. I mean, we talk about it every week, right? He has established himself as a legitimate part of this defensive line, a player. I'm not going to say he's a star player, but this is a guy who is part of the answer on the defensive line. They need to get more help, but 71.3, we look at him week in, week out. His first 2 weeks were rough, rookie 6th-round pick coming in. But since then he's had one bad week against Seattle. I mean, that's just outstanding, right? And he's grading 67.7 in terms of his overall grade. He's been more effective in run defense than pass rush, right? Though he does have 3.5 sacks now. He got a sack this game. That was, I'm not going to, CJ Stroud's tripped, and Dante Stills was the guy who happened to get there to touch him for the sack. So I don't want to say it was it wasn't a sack like his other sacks, but nonetheless, he's been playing super well. Really, really, really excited what we're getting out of Dante Stills, right? Roy Lopez, 80.1 on 40 snaps. Roy Lopez has looked really solid as part of that, as nose tackle, as part of the defensive rotation. He's a 6th-round pick out of 2021 by the Houston Texans out of Arizona. You look at his grades throughout the year, he's had a few down weeks, one bad week against Cincinnati, a few that were a little lower, but overall, I mean, he's graded at 69.4. This is a guy you want to keep around, right? And see if he can continue to play like that. He is definitely, like, with your interior defensive line, you need some depth guys. You need guys that you can rotate. This is a piece you want to keep along with Dante Stills, and then you draft some guys that are maybe more, blue chippers in there. But he has looked good. Phil Hoskins, guy who I think this is his first game with them, playing 74.0 on 33 snaps. Right, he's a guy that. Former 7th-round pick, Carolina Panthers, one game with us this year, right? 33 snaps. He played very limited snaps in Carolina, didn't do anything. It's one game, it's small sample size, so I'm not going to necessarily say that he's necessarily shown that he's part of a rotation or anything yet, but it's certainly a nice first game. Let's go down to the rest of the interior defensive linemen, then we'll come back to linebackers. Kevin Strong on 21 snaps really had a rough game, 37.1. That wasn't great. Leki Fotu, he got injured. I think there's reports are that he may not necessarily have to miss time. We'll see. But, he had a really good game, right? And graded at 80.8. That was his best game of the year. But you see how up and down he's been, and he's still, 45.7 isn't cutting it overall. It's best of his career, but it's a low bar, right? So, he had a nice game. He had a sack. We'll see if he's misses time or not, and what he does from here on out. He's been better than he was in the past, but that again is a low bar. And it definitely seems like Roy Lopez has been much better. And then let's see, as far as interior defensive line, I think that's all of those folks. Then we're getting to the outside linebackers. We got a couple of questions and comments about that. Keith Davis saying, how do you see Cam Thomas's future with us? Yeah, and then August KK saying, I was super high on Cam and MyJ, pretty disappointed, to be honest. So yeah, I'm obviously MyJ was cut, and I believe he's with the Texans. At least that's who I think originally picked him up. Cameron Thomas, he started out the season grading consistently in the 60s. It's gone down. He hasn't really done much in terms of sack, any kind of pressures or anything like that, or no sacks. But he was grading okay, and then and his snaps have kind of been going down a little bit in flux. He's back up to 22 this week. His overall grade is 59.4. What I think is, I think they will keep him around through his rookie deal and see if they can get him, if he can find a role in this defense where he can be more effective. But I really had higher hopes for him. So we'll see what happens. How do I see his future with this? I do see it as, it's yet to be determined. They are playing him some. If I were a betting man, I'd bet that 3 years from now, he's not really part of this team. I'd love to see myself be wrong about that. I just think right now they're just playing the guys they've got, and they're going to build through the draft the way they want to. And I just have this feeling that, he's not producing right now. I think they're just going to bring in their guys is what I'm suspecting, but we'll see. Right. Just definitely sad about that. Disappointed. Was hoping those two would be a nice part of this future, but player that I am, I think a lot of people are starting to become a little more optimistic about Zaven Collins. 73.2. He had a solid game. If you look at it, he started out a little bit of an adjustment, adjusting to the role of edge rusher, but of late he's been much better, right? Look at these grades from kind of weeks 5 and 6 on, even his pass rush grade, which we've talked about this, adjusting to edge rush from being an off-ball linebacker, that pass rush was going to take time to develop. Well, I think he's still got work to do, but the grades seem to be in pass rush consistently better than they were, right? We're seeing just a little bit of an uptick aside from this week in Baltimore. In fact, and I want to shout out to Jace, who's a part of the Discord, who messaged me and pointed this out. If you look at from week 6 through 11, grades for edge rushers in the NFL, right? Weeks 6 through 11. And you sort it like we sorted custom weeks 6 to 11 edge rushers, and did this minimum snaps 20%, so that you're not including the people who have 10 snaps and happen to have a high grade, keeping out the low sample size, right? Zaven Collins is the eighth highest grade amongst edge rushers in that span, 83.1, right? So that gives you a sense of how well he's been playing. Now, I still feel like when we look at what Zaven Collins does, he does have 4 sacks, right? So that's nice, a nice thing. Although those 4 sacks, if you look at it, only one of them came through the stretch we're talking about, right? A lot of them came earlier. I think what he's doing is the sacks are not the biggest part of what he's doing. I think he's doing other things in terms of against the run, and helping set the edge, making plays, against ball carriers and doing other things. So, he's playing a role in this defense that's not the pure kind of pin your ears back and go after the quarterback all the time kind of edge rusher. I think what they do in this defense, it's more, involved than just that. But he's playing really well, right? I am curious what's going to happen with Kazir White out, though. Are we going to see Collins shift in terms of how and where, do they play him more kind of in the off-ball linebacker role? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. So let's see. I want to take a quick look. If we look at snap alignment, no, they didn't move him into the box this game at all, right? So they didn't move him there when Kaiser White went out, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him, right? But if nothing else, he's playing really well so far, or of late. Dennis Gardeck had a solid game. He's a guy who all year has, been a pretty solid player for them. He started out really well, a little bit of a down spell here, but has had a couple good weeks lately. His grading is 78.6, right? So, we love Gardeck, right? So, what he does for this team, he's got 5 sacks this season. So, he's a nice piece of the rotation there. Ojulari graded 63.6, kind of average. Now, he did get recorded with a sack, but I want to put that in context. His sack, if you remember when Tank Dell had the kind of the lateral thrown to him, and he was going to throw, but he just opted not to throw because the receiver wasn't open, right? It was kind of a little bit of a trick play. And so he decides not to throw. So Tank Dell then runs and kind of gets just short of the line of scrimmage and gets tackled. It becomes kind of run play, but it's really a pass play. BJ Ojolari got the sack on that play. So, he got it. It counts. It's a sack. It's a play he made. I'm not trying to take it away from him by any stretch, but if we're looking at BJ Ojolari in terms of his progress as the pass rusher who gets after the quarterback, this sack, wasn't that, but he's still been playing, he has 4 sacks, since most of them of late. Still like what we're seeing from him, no doubt. Victor Dimukeje, didn't have a great game. He started out really well. Lately, his play has kind of gone down, as you see, in terms of his grades haven't been as good of late. His snaps have also, I wouldn't say that. I guess you couldn't say they've gone down. He had one really high snap count game against Dallas, but the rest of the season's been kind of in that range. But his grade is kind of going down a bit, because he's not played as well of late. 70.1. I think he's still a nice piece of this pass rush rotation. Certainly, they've gotten some good production out of him, but as considering as a 6th round pick, but he's definitely trailed off a bit. But Ojolari is stepping up, so I think we're seeing maybe a little bit more of a shifting there. So that's what we're getting out of the edge rushers. Let's look at the middle linebackers, right? We'll go and sort this by position. Josh Woods, 55 snaps, 54.1. Grade wasn't great, right? Kaiser White, on his 26 snaps didn't grade particularly well. We know he's down for the season. Chris Barnes had a really nice game on 22 snaps, 88.4. If we look at his grades throughout the season, he's only played in 4 games. This was his best game, but he's had last couple games, the first games 2 and 3 of the season, weeks 2 and 3, he graded well. So, we're going to see more of him. Hopefully he continues to play well as he steps into, a bigger role for this team. Let's see if we got any other positions we've missed. I think we got the defensive line. We got the cornerback, safeties, edge. So, all right. So I think we've got all the positions there on defense. Let's take a quick look at what the Texans did grade-wise. I mean, Tank Dell had a hell of a game. We all saw what he did, right? He was all over the place. Such a great pick for them, right, in the 3rd round. Receiver Sims had a nice game. CJ Stroud graded well despite having those interceptions. One of them was a tip pass, so they're not really going to count that as against him as badly, right? But solid game overall for him. Dalton Schultz had a nice game. Nico Collins, John Mechie. So they're receivers. They got some good games out of them. Robert Woods, an all right game. Offensive line, Mason, Tunsil, okay games, right? Mediocre. The Tyus Howard, their left guard, had a rough game. Some low grades here, right here and there, but mostly good play out of the Texans. Then we look at their defense. Dylan Horton had a really nice game on 11 snaps. Blake Cashman stepped in. I think he was playing for an injured linebacker, I believe, had a good game. They had some decent grades up here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but cornerback Stingley had some nice plays. Down at the bottom, see some of the defense. Myjai Sanders, there we go, 8 snaps, didn't grade particularly well. Let's take a look at what he's done since he's been with them, just out of curiosity, right? He's played in 3 games, limited snaps, so, right? So, yeah, so, we're not going to go through all these. You've got some player, Will Anderson, had an all right game, but not a stellar game, right? So, now let's real quick do one of the things I like to do is look at how the Cardinals kind of lineup looks, in terms of their grades. So we'll start with the base defense. We've got Hamilton, Wilson here at the cornerbacks, Collins, Gardeck, interior defensive line, Stills grading well, Fotu, Strong, not so great. Linebackers, White, Woods, White's still going to be out. Thompson, Baker grade well, no doubt. So that looks good. We'll switch it to the nickel. They move a few other folks in here. You're right, Ojolari and Gardeck in there, right? Williams. You're seeing some more green in here, which is nice, right? We look at the offensive side. We got Kyler Murray, which is nice to see him listed there. It's grade 65.9 where we would expect and hope to see that go up. Connor, he's grading well, obviously. McBride, Dortch, they got listed in there. We'll be seeing Michael Wilson back in there right soon, I think. Hilliard Brown has graded reasonably well. Rondale Moore, not so great. Offensive line has been, very, very mediocre grade wise this year. We'll put in the 2 tight end set, then we get Swaim. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's some players that we're seeing, McBride, that we like what we're seeing for sure, right? And other guys like that. So yeah. Otis Driftwood, thanks for being here. Yo, what's up? We're just getting ready to wrap things up here, but yeah, Cardinals, had a little bit of a rough game against a team that I think, is looking like they're a solid team. Those Houston Texans, right? Great quarterback, good coach there. We need, I think the story out of this game is, Kyler had a little bit of a rough game. Getting the rust off. We need to see that change, right? We've got, some players like Garrett Williams and Dante Stills, some of those rookies continuous to show us some things. And yes, sadly, Marco Wilson, number 20, just is not looking like he's a piece that you want to really have as part of the future of this team. I don't know how long they're going to keep, kind of putting him out there as cornerback 1. I really hope it's not much longer. I really want to see Garrett Williams at number 1. I'd like to see Keitrell Clark back out there. I know he had a rough time. I'm not sure why they're not playing him more. I'd like to see if after, a little bit more time, later in the season, is he, going to play better. But there's some nice young pieces here. McBride, Stills, Williams to build around. Ojolari, right? So there's some things to be optimistic about. Kyler, we need to see the arm get back up to what he can do. The legs seem to be up to speed. It's the arm, the throws we need to see. So that's what we got for this week, right? So, it was a rough game, but it wasn't Clayton Tune against the Cleveland Browns rough. So we'll see what happens next week. But I appreciate y'all hanging out with us as we do what we do on Making the Grade. So what we're going to do is we're going to get out of here. I'm going to put the channel member shout outs up there to, as the way of just kind of acknowledging those who support the channel as channel members. If you want to do that, there's a link in the description of how to do that. Thank you all for hanging out with us. We're going to get out of here, and I hope everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving. Be safe. Enjoy being with your family and friends and whoever you're spending Thanksgivings with, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Hey, yo, it's Joe. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinal Show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.